The cargo manifest flickered on Marcus Chan's datapad as he made his way through the crowded corridors of Kepler Station. Another routine delivery, medical supplies to the Outer Rim colonies, but it paid the bills. 3 years since his discharge from the Earth Defense Force, and he still wasn't used to the mundane nature of civilian life. The excitement of deep space reconnaissance missions had been replaced by the steady rhythm of cargo runs and maintenance schedules. "Marcus," called a familiar voice from behind. He turned to see Jackson weaving through the crowd, his weathered face split by a grin. "Finished loading already?" "Early as always," Marcus replied, clasping his friend's hand. Jackson had served alongside him in the EDF until a piece of shrapnel from a pirate raid left him with a pronounced limp. Now they both worked for Stellar Freight Solutions, hauling goods across the frontier. "What's your excuse for being here? Shouldn't you be prepping the Starwind?" "Delayed departure." "Something about customs paperwork." Jackson rolled his eyes. "Want to grab some real food while we wait? I heard there's a new place in the cultural district that actually seasons their protein cubes." Marcus was about to respond when a commotion erupted from the marketplace ahead. The central hub of Kepler Station was always busy, a melting pot of dozens of species conducting business. But this sounded different, urgent. Panicked voices in multiple languages created a cacophony that made his military instincts prickle. "What's going on?" Jackson asked, craning his neck to see over the crowd. Before Marcus could answer, they heard the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging. Both men exchanged a look that sound meant trouble. Marcus pushed forward through the throng of beings, his trained eyes scanning for threats. Years of combat training kicked in automatically, cataloging escape routes, potential weapons, civilian positions. The marketplace opened before them, a vast circular space filled with vendors' stalls selling everything from rare spices to advanced technology. Alien architecture soared overhead, creating a cathedral-like atmosphere with its flowing curves and bioluminescent lighting. Today, however, the usual festive atmosphere was tainted with fear. A group of heavily armed figures in dark body armor had positioned themselves near the central fountain. Their faces were hidden behind tactical masks, but their movements spoke of military training. They weren't random pirates or petty criminals. This was organized. Everyone remained calm, one of them announced through a voice amplifier. "We are here to deliver a message to the Galactic Assembly. The human contamination of our sacred spaces ends today." Marcus felt his blood chill. Anti-human sentiment had been growing in certain sectors, fueled by radical groups who saw Earth's expanding presence in galactic affairs as a threat to traditional alien cultures. It seemed those tensions had finally boiled over into violence. "Jocks, we need to get people out of here," he whispered, but his friend was already moving, quietly directing nearby civilians toward the emergency exits. That's when Marcus saw her. A small figure darted between the legs of fleeing shoppers, her silver skin catching the light like liquid mercury. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old by human standards, with the distinctive elongated limbs and graceful movements of a Valorian child. Her large, luminous eyes were wide with confusion rather than fear. She didn't understand the danger she was in. A Valorian. Marcus's breath caught. He'd only seen one once before, during a diplomatic mission to the frontier. They were considered among the most beautiful species in the galaxy, with their naturally luminescent skin and almost ethereal appearance. They were also extremely rare this far from their home system. The child was chasing something, a small, hovering toy that bobbed and weaved through the chaos. She giggled as she pursued it, completely oblivious to the armed figures only 50 meters away. Where were her parents? Valorians were notoriously protective of their young, never letting them wander alone. "Stop right there," one of the armed figures suddenly shouted, pointing in the child's direction. "Nobody moves." The marketplace fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the child's delighted laughter as she finally caught her toy. She hugged it to her chest, turning in a circle as if looking for someone to share her triumph with. That's when she noticed the armed figures staring at her. Marcus saw the leader reach for something at his belt. In the tactical lighting, he caught the gleam of metal and explosive device. The man's body language spoke of grim determination, of someone about to make a statement written in blood and fire. Time slowed to a crawl. Marcus's mind raced through calculations, distance, blast radius, civilian positions. The child stood directly in the center of what would be the kill zone. Even if he shouted a warning, she was too young to understand, too small to run fast enough. There was only one option. Without conscious thought, Marcus was moving. His legs pumped beneath him as he sprinted across the open marketplace, drawing the attention of the armed figures. Shouts erupted behind him, Jackson calling his name, security forces finally responding to the threat. But Marcus only had eyes for the silver-skinned child, who stood frozen as a strange human raced toward her. The leader's hand found the detonator. Marcus reached the child just as the explosive device activated. He scooped her up in one fluid motion, his body already turning to shield her from the blast. The little Valorian's eyes were impossibly wide, but she didn't struggle in his arms. For a heartbeat, they were airborne, Marcus's momentum carrying them both away from ground zero. Then the world exploded. The force of the blast hit him like a physical wall, driving the air from his lungs. White-hot shrapnel tore through his back and shoulders as he curled around the child, using his body as a living shield. Pain like nothing he'd ever experienced lanced through him, but he held on, protecting the fragile life in his arms. They hit the ground hard, Marcus taking the full impact as they rolled. The child's silver skin seemed to pulse with its own inner light, and when she placed her small hands against his chest, he felt an odd warmth spread through him despite the agony of his injuries. The marketplace erupted into chaos. Emergency alarms wailed, security forces flooded the area, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Through the haze, Marcus could see medical teams rushing toward them, but his vision was already growing dark around the edges. "Are you hurt?" he managed to whisper to the child. She shook her head, tears streaming down her silver cheeks. When she spoke, it was in perfect, unaccented standard unusual for such a young Valorian. "You saved me." "Why did you save me?" Marcus smiled weakly. "Because that's what we do, kid. That's what good people do." As consciousness faded, the last thing he saw was the child's face, her luminous eyes filled with gratitude, and something else, a spark of recognition, as if she understood exactly what his sacrifice meant. Her small hands remained pressed against his chest, and he could swear he felt strength flowing from her into him, keeping him tethered to life by the thinnest of threads. Then darkness claimed him, and Marcus. Chun fell into dreams filled with silver light and gentle voices speaking in languages he didn't recognize, but somehow understood. Consciousness returned to Marcus, like slowly surfacing from deep water. The first thing he noticed was the absence of pain in his back and shoulders, which should have been screaming from the shrapnel wounds, felt merely tender. The second thing was the gentle humming that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, a soothing melody that resonated in his bones. His eyes fluttered open to reveal a ceiling that defied description. What appeared to be living crystal formations grew in elegant spirals overhead, pulsing with soft bioluminescent light that shifted from deep blue to silver and back again. The air smelled of something between jasmine and ozone, clean and energizing. "The human awakens," announced a melodious voice from somewhere to his left. Marcus turned his head carefully, expecting pain that never came. A tall figure stood beside what he assumed was medical equipment, though it looked more like art than machinery flowing organic shapes that hummed with the same energy as the walls. The being was clearly Valorian, with the characteristic silver skin and elongated proportions, but older than the child he'd saved. Intricate patterns traced across the being's face and hands, marking them as a healer. "Where am I?" Marcus croaked, his throat surprisingly clear. "The Valorian Medical Complex on Kepler Station," the healer replied. "I am Healer Valdris. You have been unconscious for 3 standard days while your body integrated our cellular reconstruction treatments." 3 days. Marcus sat up carefully, marveling at how smoothly his body responded. He'd expected to be laid up for weeks with injuries like he'd sustained. "The child Zephyra, is she okay?" A new voice answered from the doorway, rich and warm with an accent that made standard sound like music. "She is perfectly well, thanks to you." Marcus's breath, caught as the most beautiful being he'd ever seen, entered the room. She was clearly Valorian, but where the healer's skin was a uniform silver, hers shimmered with subtle rainbow undertones that shifted as she moved. Her features were elegant and aristocratic, with high cheekbones and eyes that held the depth of starfields. She wore flowing robes that seemed to move with a life of their own, and when she walked, she carried herself with the natural grace of someone born to command. "My name is Serafina Veltar," she continued, stopping at the foot of his bed. "Zephyra is my daughter." "She's safe?" Marcus asked, the relief evident in his voice. Seraphine's expression softened. "More than safe. She hasn't stopped talking about the brave human who shielded her from the blast. She's been asking to see you every day." Her gaze met his directly, and Marcus felt an unexpected jolt of awareness pass between them. "I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid." "No debt," Marcus said automatically. "Anyone would have—" "No," Serafina interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. "Not anyone. I've reviewed the security footage. You had perhaps 2 seconds to react, yet you moved without hesitation. That kind of instinctive courage is rare in any species." "Healer." Valdris glided forward with a device that looked like a crystal tuning fork. "If I may, the reconstruction process requires monitoring. Please remain still." As the healer worked, running the device over Marcus's torso, Serafina moved to stand beside the large window that dominated one wall of the room. From here, Marcus could see they were in the upper levels of the station, with a spectacular view of the starfield beyond. "The terrorists?" Marcus asked. "Were they captured?" "Dead," Serafina replied without turning around. "Security forces eliminated them, but not before they transmitted their message to several news networks. Anti-human sentiment is spreading through certain sectors of Valorian space." Marcus studied her profile, noting the tension in her shoulders. "And you? How do you feel about humans?" She turned then, and he was struck again by her ethereal beauty. But it was her eyes that held him ancient wisdom in a face that appeared youthful, as if she'd seen too much, but hadn't let it harden her. "My feelings about humans are complicated," she said carefully. "But recent events have given me a new perspective." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the door chimed and a familiar voice called out, "If you're decent in there, I'm coming in whether you like it or not." Jackson limped into the room, his weathered face split by a relieved grin. "Marcus, you stubborn bastard, don't ever scare me like that again." He paused when he noticed Serafina, his expression becoming suddenly formal. "Ma'am, I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Serafina replied graciously. "You must be Jackson. Zephyra mentioned the other kind human who helped evacuate civilians." Jackson flushed slightly. "Just doing what anyone would do. Though I should have known Marcus would do something typically heroic and stupid." He looked at his friend with a mixture of affection and exasperation. "The entire station's talking about it. Human saves Valorian child, nearly dies in the process." "You're famous, buddy." "Great," Marcus muttered. "Just what I needed." Serafina stepped forward. "Which brings me to why I'm here, beyond checking on your recovery." She seemed to gather herself, taking on the bearing of someone about to make an important speech. Mr. Chun, I would like to offer you a position. Marcus blinked. A position? As my family security consultant. The attack on the marketplace was specifically targeting Valorian civilians, and my daughter in particular. As a trade negotiator working to establish better human-Valorian relations, I've made enemies among the more traditional elements of my people. You're a diplomat? Marcus asked, pieces clicking into place. Among other things, I represent Valorian interests in several trade consortiums and sit on the Galactic Assembly's Economic Council. She moved closer to his bed, and Marcus caught a scent like starflowers and morning rain. The attack 3 days ago was the second attempt on my daughter's life in as many months. Jackson whistled low. Someone really doesn't want you making friends with humans. Indeed. And conventional security has proven ... inadequate. Seraphon's gaze fixed on Marcus. But you acted when trained professionals hesitated. You have instincts that could keep my daughter safe. Marcus looked between Seraphina and Jackson, his mind racing. I'm not exactly security material anymore. I was discharged from the EDF-4 for refusing an order that would have resulted in civilian casualties. Seraphina interrupted smoothly. I've read your complete file, Mr. Chun. Your commanding officers may have questioned your judgment, but I see a man who puts conscience above regulations. That's exactly the kind of person I need protecting my family. The pay would be substantial, she continued. Full diplomatic protection, living quarters in the Valorian sector, and access to our medical facilities. She gestured to his healing body. As you can see, we have certain advantages in that regard. Marcus felt drawn to her offer for reasons that went beyond mere employment. There was something about Seraphina that called to him her strength, her obvious love for her daughter, the way she carried herself with dignity, despite the threats she faced. There's one more thing, she said, her voice dropping slightly. Zephyra has been asking for you constantly. She seems to have formed an attachment. In Valorian culture, when someone saves a child's life, they become part of the family's extended kinship group. You would not just be an employee, but a guardian brother to my daughter. The door chimed again, and a small silver figure peered around the edge. Zephyra's luminous eyes found Marcus immediately, and her face lit up with pure joy. Marcus, she exclaimed, rushing to his bedside. Mother said you were awake. Are you feeling better? I helped heal you. Did you know Valorians can do that? Marcus smiled, genuinely moved by the child's enthusiasm. I did feel something when you touched me. Thank you, Zephyra. She beamed and climbed carefully onto the chair beside his bed. Will you stay with us, please? Mother says bad people want to hurt me, but you're brave enough to stop them. Looking into those innocent, trusting eyes, Marcus felt something shift inside him. For the first time since his discharge, he had a purpose that mattered. And if he was being honest with himself, the prospect of working closely with Seraphina held its own appeal. What do you say, Mr. Chun? Seraphina asked, her voice carrying a note of hope. Will you help us? Marcus looked around the room, at Jackson's encouraging nod, at Zephyra's hopeful expression, at Seraphon's elegant beauty and underlying vulnerability. 3 days ago, he'd been a directionless cargo pilot. Now he was being offered a chance to matter again, to protect something precious. When do I start? He said. 2 weeks into his new position, Marcus had settled into a routine that felt both foreign and surprisingly natural. Seraphon's residential tower occupied the top 15 floors of one of Kepler Station's most prestigious buildings, a crystalline spire that seemed to grow organically from the station's superstructure. The Valorian Quarter was a marvel of bioarchitectural engineering, with living walls that filtered air and adjusted lighting based on the inhabitants' circadian rhythms. Marcus stood on the observation deck of Seraphine's private quarters, watching the morning shift change in the docking bays far below. His enhanced security clearance allowed him access to most areas of their home, and he'd spent the past days cataloging potential vulnerabilities. The more he learned about Valorian culture and technology, the more impressed he became, and the more concerned about the threats they faced. "You're up early again." Seraphine's voice came from behind him, warm with the familiarity that had developed over their shared meals and late-night security briefings. He turned to find her, approaching with 2 steaming cups of what she called star tea, a Valorian beverage that tasted like liquid sunshine and somehow made him feel more alert without the jittery edge of human caffeine. She wore a simple flowing gown that seemed to shift color in the morning light, her silver skin luminous in the soft illumination of the living walls. "Habit from the military," he said, accepting the cup gratefully. "Dawn patrol, perimeter checks. Old routines die hard. And what has your morning reconnaissance revealed?" she asked, moving to stand beside him at the railing. Her proximity sent a familiar warmth through him that had nothing to do with the hot beverage. 3 potential infiltration routes, assuming someone could bypass the main security systems. The environmental conduits are shielded, but not monitored. The maintenance access tunnels have automated sensors, but they're keyed to recognize station personnel, easy enough to fake if you have the right equipment. He paused, studying her profile. Someone with inside knowledge could map your routines, predict your movements. Seraphine's expression grew troubled. "You suspect someone in my household. I suspect everyone until proven otherwise. It's kept me alive this long." Marcus softened his tone at her worried look. "But I've been observing your staff. Most of them have been with you for years, show genuine loyalty. There are a few that warrant closer attention." "Such as?" Marcus hesitated. This was delicate territory, accusing someone's trusted employees of potential betrayal. "Your aide, Liana. She has access to your schedule, knows your security protocols, and she's been asking a lot of questions about human customs and military tactics. Claims it's to better understand cultural integration, but you have concerns." Serafina sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Liana has served my family for 5 years. Her sister died in the bombing of the Valorian trade station last year, an attack many blamed on human separatists, which would give her motive to oppose. Your work toward human Valorian cooperation," Marcus finished. "I'm not making accusations, just observations. But someone leaked the information that put Sephira in that marketplace at the exact time the terrorists struck." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the controlled chaos of the docking bays. A massive cargo hauler was maneuvering into position, its bulk casting shadows across the observation deck. Marcus found himself acutely aware of Serafina beside him, the way she held herself with natural grace, the subtle scent of starflowers that seemed to emanate from her skin, the occasional brush of her arm against his as she gestured. "There's something else," she said eventually. "I received word yesterday that the Galactic Assembly wants to accelerate the timeline for the trade negotiations. Instead of having months to build consensus, we now have 3 weeks." Marcus frowned. "That sounds like pressure tactics. Someone wants to force your hand, make you agree to terms before you're ready. Or they want to create conditions where I'm more vulnerable to attack." Seraphine's jaw tightened. "The final negotiations will take place at the assembly station. Neutral ground, supposedly, but I'll be surrounded by delegates from dozens of species, many of whom oppose closer human-Valorian ties. I'm coming with you." "That may not be possible. The assembly has strict protocols about security personnel. They provide their own protection for all delegates. Then I'll find another way. Cultural attach, trade consultant, whatever it takes." Marcus turned to face her fully, struck by the genuine concern in her luminous eyes. "I'm not letting you walk into that kind of situation alone." Something shifted in the space between them, a tension that had been building since their first meeting. Seraphine's patterns began to pulse more rapidly, and Marcus found himself stepping closer without conscious decision. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice carrying a note he hadn't heard before. "You must understand, what we're doing here working together, living in such proximity, it's not how Valorian society typically operates." "How so?" he asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "We're a formal people. Relationships follow, established patterns, carefully negotiated alliances between families. What I feel when I'm near you." She paused, her hand rising as if to touch his face before stopping just short. "It's not logical. It's not proper. It's purely emotional, and that terrifies me." Marcus caught her hand gently, marveling at the cool silk of her skin. "It terrifies me too. I never expected to feel this way about someone so different from me. But different doesn't mean wrong, doesn't it?" Her eyes searched his face. "I'm negotiating the future relationship between our peoples. If word spread that I was romantically involved with a human, it could undermine everything I'm working toward. The purists would use it as evidence that I've been compromised, that I can't represent Valorian interests objectively. And if that's true, if working with humans has changed your perspective, then perhaps that's exactly what both our peoples need," she whispered, finally allowing her fingers to trace the line of his jaw. "Someone who understands that cooperation isn't betrayal, that love doesn't recognize species boundaries." The word hung in the air between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Love. Marcus felt his breath catch at the admission, even as his heart rate accelerated. Serafina. Before he could finish the thought, an alarm began chiming throughout the residential tower. Emergency lights bathed the observation deck in pulsing red, and Marcus's combat instincts kicked in immediately. "Where's Zafara?" he demanded, already moving toward the interior. "Her tutoring session should be finishing in the study," Serafina replied, her diplomat's composure reasserting itself, even as worry creased her features. They ran through corridors that were suddenly filled with security. Personnel, Marcus's. Enhanced clearance allowing them to bypass the lockdown protocols. The study was 3 levels down, accessed through what should have been secure passages. But Marcus's training screamed that something was wrong. Too many guards in the wrong positions. Response times that were either too fast or too slow. Kind of coordinated chaos that suggested either incompetence or deliberation. They reached the study to find it empty. Chairs overturned and learning materials scattered across the floor. A window that should have been sealed was standing open, cool air rushing through from the station's environmental systems. "No," Serafina breathed, rushing to the window. "She's gone." Marcus was already examining the scene, his military training cataloging details. Struggle here by the desk. At least 2 attackers, maybe 3. They came through the window-repelling equipment, probably from the maintenance level above. He found something that made his blood run cold. And they had inside help. "This window has biometric locks. Only someone with authorized access could open it." "Liana," Serafina whispered, her face pale with realization and grief. A communication device on the desk suddenly activated, projecting the image of a figure in dark robes. The face was hidden, but the voice was unmistakably Valorian, speaking in the formal dialect reserved for official pronouncements. "Serafini Veltar," the figure intoned. "Your daughter is safe, for now. You have corrupted yourself with human influence and betrayed the purity of our species. Renounce your negotiations, publicly denounce human expansion into Valorian space, and she will be returned unharmed." "You coward," Serafina snarled, her composure finally cracking. "She's a child. She is the future of our race, infected with human sympathy before she's old enough to understand the threat they represent. Perhaps time among true Valorians will cure her of these dangerous notions." The transmission ended, leaving them in silence, broken only by the continuing alarms. Marcus pulled Serafina into his arms as she finally broke down, her strength momentarily overwhelmed by fear for her daughter. In that moment, holding her as she trembled against his chest. He realized that his feelings had moved far beyond professional duty or even physical attraction. This was love, complete and transformative, and he would move heaven and earth to bring her daughter home safely. "We'll find her," he promised, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't care who we have to go through or what it takes. We'll bring Zephyra home." Serafina pulled back to look at him, her luminous eyes bright with tears, but also with a fierce determination that matched his own. In that moment, they both understood that their relationship had crossed a line from which there could be no retreat. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "We will."